extremely grateful to be able to have this discourse with you this morning on a matter which for me is very important, and I think it is also important for the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. To put in perspective what this is all about, I want to very briefly introduce you all to something that you may not be familiar with, but I sit here in my capacity not only as former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, but having been in that position, I was also the chairman of the National Security Council of this nation. And I want to introduce you to something called the National Central Bureau. And quote for you from the website of the entity called Interpol that describes the National Central Bureau. And it says, the National Central Bureau is a country's focal point for all Interpol activities. And then, if I go to the next page with the flag of Trinidad and Tobago, it says how Interpol supports Trinidad and Tobago to tackle international crime. And it goes on to say, Interpol in Trinidad and Tobago's principal operational police platform for sharing and receiving data. And then it says, the Commissioner of Police is the head of the National Central Bureau and is supported by an Assistant Commissioner of Police for anti-crime operations. A little further on if you go to the U.S. Embassy website, you will see Trinidad and Tobago implements Interpol Washington border security enhancements. There's a lot that goes on in national security that does not come to the fore, to the public for many reasons. And you will hear people saying that nothing has been done, the government is doing nothing, and that sort of thing. But this is the one, if you go to this particular page on the U.S. Embassy, you will see it says on the 2nd of August 2024 that it says Interpol Washington, with support from the CARICOM, Information Agency for Crime and Security Impacts, has deployed advanced technology and software solutions. Barbados was the first government to sign on. They signed on July 26th, and Trinidad and Tobago signed on August 5th. And incidentally, I should tell you, with reference here to CARICOM and CARICOM impacts, I, as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, in the bureau, the quasi-cabinet of CARICOM, I for many years held that position in CARICOM as the head who had the responsibility for regional security matters, and therefore this would have fallen under me. And if you go to another page in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Interpol Bureau page, you will see it says who we are, and it says Interpol is the world's largest criminal police organization. And what do we do? It says our areas of focus involves cybercrime, environmental crime, firearms and explosives, maritime piracy, property crimes, vehicle crimes. Interpol deals with criminal conduct. I want you to bear that in mind. As you would know, I retired from the government of Trinidad and Tobago approximately 3 months ago. And it was with a sense of great satisfaction that I left public office after approximately 45 years of service. I went into retirement happily, voluntarily. And I thought in so doing, I would set a new benchmark for the people of this country and for institutions in this country. And I left on March 17th, the morning of March 17th, I was home. And that was after, in that 4.5 decades of public service, I served at the University of the West Indies, started out as a junior research fellow, and left there to go into the political arena, the parliament, as head of the department at the University of the West Indies. I also served in the state enterprise sector, where I initiated and managed a state company. I was involved in the construction of Point Recess from mud to what it is today. At one point, I was involved in the supply of materials to build the stadium, the Twin Towers, the Hercules Hospital, the highway to San Fernando and Point Recess at the same time. All of this was at the same time. And I was responsible for supplying crushed rock for the concrete that was used in those projects. I served in the parliament as an appointed senator, an opposition senator. If my memory serves me right, I was the second voice to have spoken in the opposition for the PLM in this country when we entered the Senate in 1987 January. And I remained in the parliament after 9 consecutive general elections in the House of Representatives, where I served as a minister of government many times in many portfolios. I served as an opposition member. I served as a chairman of a committee in Parliament which brought broadcasting to the country. I served as an opposition leader, and I also served as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, where I left that position 5 months ago. Last week, Sunday, I left this country to travel to another CARICOM country. I had to travel through one CARICOM country to another. And quite a few of you knew when you asked me what I was going to be doing when I retire, I told you I'm going to spend the time with my wife and my children and grandchildren. I'm doing that right here and where else they are. And that I will do quite a bit of traveling. I told you that. So as I make my bookings and so a number of persons would know my whereabouts. And I'm willing to highlight talk to people. But in this season of hatred, spite, and retribution, it's not uncommon for uncomplimentary things and unfounded allegations and accusations to be thrown in my direction. I consider it to be par for the course. The course is getting rougher, the horizon is getting darker, but it's still par for the course. I left here last week, Sunday, and I arrived in Antigua. When I got to Antigua, I did not inform the Antiguan authorities that I was coming there, as I could have. I'm traveling on a diplomatic passport, identified as the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in that passport. I am in transit to Montserrat, where I'm going as a guest of the government of Montserrat to participate in some activities there. When I got to Antigua, I had a little layover over a few hours. I went through the normal arrangements that other entrants would go through. And I submitted my passport when it was my turn to enter Antigua on my way to Montserrat. I got tremendous assistance from the officer in contact with me, who assisted me in putting the app on my phone and making the application to enter and so on. And then this officer was extremely nice to me, very cooperative, very happy to be dealing with me. And she then went through her process. She put the passport to the machine reading instrument. And then she blinked. She slowed down her conviviality. And then she asked me to hold on. And she left me standing there. And she disappeared behind some counter into some office. And after a significant period in the context of going through immigration, she came back. Her demeanor changed a little bit, but she was still very pleasant, and she did not tell me anything. She went through the process, and she asked me to come through, and she escorted me out of the area where I was standing. I didn't think much of it, because I've been through many airports. I've filled up about 5 passports in my day, or more than 5 passports, I should say. So I was familiar with something. So I got into Antigua, and I'm in the airport, and a little surprisingly after, Antigua security came looking for me, found me, and took me into the protocol system, and took me into the executive lounge, where I would complete my waiting. One of the officers who I interacted with there, in making conversation with her, I mentioned my delay at immigration. Because I was kind of, while not bothered, I was a little concerned. And somewhere along the line, I was then told after I was there for a while, somebody spoke to somebody, and then I was told that the reason why I was delayed is because I was on a watch list. I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to create any issue in Antigua. I went on to Montserrat. I was received in Montserrat and enjoyed the protocols of the government of Montserrat and the people of Montserrat for a week. And we did what we had to do, and I came back to Antigua on my way home. I'm going through the system again in similar manner. This time a different officer. And the process went very smoothly until my passport was submitted to the machine data reading base. Same story. The officer stopped me, asked me to hold on, and the officer disappeared again. After a protracted period, the officer came back to me and said to me that I was on some list which requires me to be, what's going on there? So I asked the officer, what is this about? The officer said to me, I can't tell you what's about, but if you want to speak to my supervisor, I can arrange for you to speak to the supervisor. I said, yes, I want to speak to the supervisor. I went to speak to the supervisor, and the supervisor, again, extremely pleasant officer, explained to me that this development, which I'm experiencing, is as a result of mistaken identity. And I found that a little strange, because I don't know that is the kind of thing that happens to me. And I asked, mistaken identity with whom? And she said, another person who may not have the same birth date as you. All right. I asked, and who is interested in that person? She said, Antigua police. And that's what I got. Very concerned, and I knew that this is not just any ordinary situation. Because people's location and Antigua police are not arbitrary things. I continued to travel on to Trinidad and Tobago. I got back here on Sunday evening, and I made the necessary investigations through Caracol. And my colleagues, my friends in Caracol contacts, I knew where to talk to. And it was confirmed to me then that I was on Interpol And the issues that arose in Antigua are as a result of Antigua police responding to Interpol and Interpol's interest in me. Ladies and gentlemen, it immediately raises the question, what exactly would have happened with me and to me to cause Interpol to be interested with me? Because I told you earlier on, Interpol deals with criminal matters. So for the fact that, and it's no longer a question here as the officer told me in immigration of mistaken identity, it is confirmation that I am of interest to Interpol. I'm saying here now to you that the only way my name could have got to Interpol, it would have by way of documentation of one kind or another, placed there by some authority, either in Trinidad and Tobago or some other nation. Because Interpol covers 190 countries in the world. Interpol covers them all. And what it means is that once you go on that list, that interest is available to every country in the world, every police or immigration authority in the world, because you are now a peculiar person of interest for criminal matters. And usually it is criminal fugitive matters. People who are wanted and cannot be found, you ask Interpol to help you find them. People who are fleeing a country, you ask Interpol to identify them so they can be detained until the country who is looking after them, looking for them, get to the station for them. And then the question arises, how did I get on Interpol's list? And it is crystal clear to me that my name could only have gone to Interpol from an entity or entities in Trinidad and Tobago. The way, as a former chairman of the National Security Council, I am familiar with these matters. I know that there would be a particular officer who is the Interpol contact. So anybody in Trinidad and Tobago for whom Interpol is to be invoked, that particular officer would be involved. That officer is a police officer. And as I read for you from the website a while ago, the Commissioner of Police is the head of that bureau, which the police can invoke from time to time. So I'm saying here now to you that having experienced what I experienced in Antigua 3 times in the last few days, it has to be that there are questions to be answered here to me and to the public by the Commissioner of Police as to whether in fact I am, as a former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, having left office 3 months ago, enjoying my retirement, moving forward into whatever years I have left in me. What is it I have done in this country to have put me under the rubric of criminal and moving from one CARICOM nation in Trinidad and Tobago through Antigua on my way to Montserrat, which would be known to the authorities here if they check the correct database, which is available to them, that I am deemed to be in the category of fugitive, so that I have to be stopped by Antigua immigration and wanted by Antigua police on the request of Interpol. Interestingly enough, I went to London 2 weeks ago. I applied for a visa to enter the UK. I got a visa. I went to London. I came back from London. This all went very smoothly. That was normal. 1 week later, I'm going to Antigua and onward to Montserrat, and I am now in the category of fugitive and being experiencing what I just described to you. This raises the question. You would have seen the Commissioner of Police on his first day in office saying by press conference to you all that he's all for transparency and accountability. And I here now say to him that I too would like that transparency to apply to me. And if he is to be believed, as per that press conference of the first day in office as Commissioner, I would like him to tell this population what exactly is the crime that I have some connection with in this country to cause the police to be moved, and to be so moved as to have me being experiencing Interpol interaction. I'm not above the law. Make it very clear in this country. I have handled the authority over tens of billions of dollars and thousands of decisions in this country during my period as minister, as Prime Minister in particular. So if in that period of my activity I broke any law, I'm not above the law. It is for the police of this country to treat with me like any other citizen with respect to law enforcement. So if there's a matter, any matter, in which I am of interest to law enforcement, you've come here this morning, you see how clear the road is, you see how my location is. Everybody in this country knows where I am. The police knows where I am. There was a police booth outside my house there recently. I asked them to remove it because they said it was dilapidated. There was police over my shoulder up until a few weeks ago. So if the police wants to have any interaction with me in Trinidad and Tobago, they could have done that, and they could do that, and they are welcome to do that anytime. I would like to know, and I trust that the rest of the population would want to know, what would have been the circumstances and what is the guiding factor that would have caused the authorities in Trinidad and Tobago to get my name into the international community as a person who has issues with criminality in Trinidad and Tobago and is of such a nature that you require the involvement and assistance of Interpol. That officer who holds that desk of Interpol contact, if a matter comes up there of this nature, I would like to believe that no such action would be taken against any person without the senior superior officer being involved with appropriate oversight. And that senior superior officer, the Commissioner of Police, I would like to believe, if the Commissioner of Police is in the loop, as he must be or ought to be, where a former Prime Minister of this country is to be put in the hands of Interpol and his name be put in the international circles for law enforcement, to take note and appropriate action if so required, that the National Security Council of this country would be appropriately involved. And it's on that basis that I'm putting this squarely in the lap of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and the Commissioner of Police of Trinidad and Tobago and the Attorney General, who, it is my view, this development is the kind of development I would expect from the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, an individual that I will get back to in the not too distant future. But for the moment, I just say to you that this is what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to say this to the wider national community, many of whom have taken sides one way or the other. I remember in 1939, there was something called the League of Nations, which was the precursor entity before the United Nations. And Emperor Haile Selassie had his country invaded by Italy. He appealed to the League of Nations for help and protection. They turned their back on him. And in so doing, destroyed whatever potential the League of Nations would have had to foster international peace. And in that moment of despair, Emperor Haile Selassie said these words. He said, "Today for me, tomorrow for you." And we didn't have to wait long. We didn't have to wait long for World War II to follow the outcomes of World War I. And I want to say to all the people of Trinidad and Tobago that what I experienced last week, today is my day. Your day will come. If these people are allowed to stamp and label Trinidad and Tobago in this way. Because you see, it is not only personal, it is national. Because whatever they may want to say, however you may want to view me, the one thing you could never erase from the history and the future of this country is that I was the Prime Minister of this country, and I am the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And when I held that office and all the other offices, I always did so with a caveat that I don't do it for myself. I do it for the greater good of the nation, to uplift the nation. And the fact that I, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, 3 months after I left office, this is the country where a Prime Minister could leave office and 3 months after, he's the subject of Interpol activity. Doesn't say much for Trinidad and Tobago. And it doesn't say much for me either. Except that I would like to know what exactly did I do in my life as a public officer and now as a private citizen to cause the authorities in Trinidad and Tobago to put me in that situation. And if they could do that to me, they could do it to others. You will have seen the Attorney General having a shocking presentation in the Parliament a few weeks ago. As Attorney General, the country's chief law enforcement officer, who should be protecting the rights of all citizens, doesn't matter which side of the floor he's in Parliament, getting up in the Parliament and pointing at members of Parliament and saying, "I'm coming for you, and for you." And I watched that and was appalled. And I saw no objection to that from quarters in this country. Apparently, we are normalizing that kind of behavior in this country. And I experienced it last week. So today, I am calling on the Prime Minister, head of the National Security Council, and the Commissioner of Police, the officer with the responsibility for the Bureau of Interpol in Trinidad and Tobago, to tell not me, tell the country what crime I am being investigated for and why it is that the police in Trinidad and Tobago could not carry out their duties here and had to resort to Interpol. Because one thing I should tell you, Interpol is not an investigating agency. Interpol is an agency that comes in where criminal matters have been determined and persons are, in most instances, attempting to flee justice. I call this development nothing more than a dastardly defamation fabricated, constructed, and executed by the government agencies of Trinidad and Tobago, led by a government which seems to be more interested in retribution, hate, spite, divisiveness. And only such a government will put this stain on Trinidad and Tobago. Only such a government will put this stain on Trinidad and Tobago. It means that if they come out now and lie that they don't know about this and they didn't do this, then this remains on Interpol's list. Because who put it there is who has to take it off. And if they don't take it off, it means that every time I travel, anywhere I go in the world, I can expect this and worse to happen. This happened inside of CARICOM. You could imagine if I was in Belgium or South Africa or in Timbuktu, what would have been my position? Thankfully, it first arose in Antigua. And I'm calling on the government and the agency involved to do two things. One, tell the country what is the interest in me and what crime or crimes I'm associated with that requires police attention. And second, I'm calling on the government, knowing that I have done nothing wrong as far as I am concerned. I'm calling on the government to remove my name from this defamation. I knew they were very unhappy when I left CARICOM to the plaudits of my colleagues. They were equally unhappy when I received a doctorate, an honorary doctorate at Howard University. They were despairing when I gave up office in this country and walked away into private life. So they believe that since that is my record, they will create a new record for me. That's what this is about. A record according to their likeness and their image. Today, I stand here not asking anything under any Freedom of Information Act, because I know that law, not asking for anything under FIU, because I also know that law. I was involved in drafting both of them in the Parliament, so I know both of them. I'm not wasting my time there, because that is where they will take cover for the mischief that this is. I am here in the public domain, telling you what is on the record, telling you what is abroad, telling you what I have experienced, and calling on the authorities here to just give us the transparency that the Commissioner of Police promised and tell the country what this is about. And when you do that, take my name out of your defamation. I want to ask you, members of the media, since you have come here from town, the edge of town here, I will give you one non-Interpol question. So I'm not going to do any interview on any other matters. I want to focus on this issue alone today. I promise you, I know you have lots of things you may want to ask me. But I promise you, I don't think I've done an interview with the media since I've left office. I don't think I have. I promise you that sometime in the not too distant future, to invite you back here so we can talk about random thoughts about things in general. If you have any questions on the matter that I've just raised, put it to me now and I'll see if I can assist you.
Dr. Rowley, are you contemplating legal action?
No. At this location, I will not. But I don't know what the answer to the questions are. I've asked questions. And those questions should be answers. And the person who gives the answers should be able to give them in and out of Parliament.
Did you get any decision to leave Trinidad?
No. I've traveled, as I told you, I went to the UK 2 weeks ago. It's very smoothly. I applied for a UK visa, I got it with no problem, with the assistance of the officers locally. I have never had any issue traveling in and out of this country. I consider myself you know, a citizen who enjoys the fact that I'm traveling with passport of Trinidad and Tobago. Interestingly enough, I am now traveling on a diplomatic passport, like the last one. But when I gave up office as Prime Minister, the new passport was issued, diplomatic passport as well, as former Prime Minister. That's the passport I travel in.
You said your Antigua officers said that it was a case of mistaken identity. Is it that they couldn't believe
I think the officer was being nice to me. Because my inquiries further threw up that it's an Interpol situation. And it concerns me.
Will this incident, this recent incident, dictate your future travel plans?
No, I will continue to travel. And as a matter of fact, I'm traveling to Barbados on Thursday. And I have plans for other travel. I will not be stymied by these people who believe that they could dictate my future. I'm simply bringing this to the attention of the public for whatever it is worth, and to let you know where we have reached in this country with our interactions in the political arena.
Have you been any time to speak with Commissioner about it?
No, I'm not doing that either, because I'm not one of these persons like my former colleagues who populate the parliament now, who will hear that police looking for me and ask me, police, are you really looking for me? I don't want to do that. Police know my address. Yeah? I will not be speaking to the police on this. It is for the police now to speak to you or to me. Yes, Kate.
Sorry.
Good morning, Kim Woodram at the Express. Dr. Rowley, I have a question that may be a little naive in that you're a former Prime Minister and very recently so. So I then, what kind of protection is offered to a former Prime Minister, like an actual Prime Minister, if it is so easy to go and place your name on Interpol's watch list and anything could then proceed to happen to you out there outside the country?
Well, as I said, I consider the action to be one that is geared to generate a reaction. And that reaction is not to be pleasant. With respect to security, my state security no longer exists. I have, when I left office 2 months ago. Those levels of security have all evaporated. You know, I don't make a issue of this. I let it be. I'm a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and I genuinely believe my grandmother's position. And if you're born to hang, you can't hang.
What was your initial reaction when you heard that you wanted Interpol to watch this?
I am scandalized. I am scandalized. Because I know that one does not arbitrarily end up in an Interpol list. It has to be something being pursued. There has to be official contact, and there has to be documentation of one kind or another. I'm not entirely surprised, given the behavior of some of my former colleagues, and given what is passing for powerful liquor Central Island to be able to do. I was a little angry because the people that I hold responsible for this, putting me in a situation where my status, the effort is to make my status that of criminal and fugitive, had no problem in putting in the chair in the Parliament as Speaker of the House of Parliament in my country, a convicted criminal and fugitive. from justice to speak on the house. I have no problem with that. They have law enforcement issues. To put my name in a situation where I could be stopped at immigration abroad in the category of a person for whom Interpol is interested.
Can we just pause? We have to change our battery and